Hey smart people, Toby Salami here. I have here a simple page that I have created, and you can see here the email address is waiting to be entered. Let's enter an email address that doesn't quite exist inside of my database. Let me add something like you@tobysalami.com. But first, before I enter the .com, you can see here that it's validating that this is not a valid email address. But once I enter the valid email address, it goes ahead to tell me that that email address did not work. Of course, you can change the error message you find here, but this is entirely your choice. I wanted to put something very generic, okay? I'm going to explain why in the course of this video. Now, that email address does not exist in my database, so if I try to click on next, it doesn't just work. But what if I enter an email address that actually does exist in the database? Quite simple, that's going to work just fine. Let me enter my tests at tobysalami.com. First, you notice it doesn't throw up an error, so I can click on next now, and I can go to the next step. Let me try a password that isn't quite right. I'm going to just type in a random password here and click on login. Now, as you can see, it says the password you entered is not correct, and you have a lost your password link ready to be clicked on. Of course, that's entirely your choice. This is how it is supposed to work. If I type in the correct password here, then it should work just fine. Let me try that. We're going to click on login, see if it works. You see form submitted successfully, and this has actually logged in. How do we know? If we try now to go to maybe the home page, you can see you have this top bar here showing this is actually logged in. We can go to the dashboard and we're actually in. And this makes a ton of sense. I'm going to show you just how you can do that. And if you're worried about some security implications here, I have that thought about, and I'm going to cover that in detail inside of this video. All you have to do is two things. You need to subscribe to this YouTube channel if this is the kind of content you love to see. I release videos about dynamic WordPress development every single week. My name is Toby Salami. If you're ready, let's get this done, shall we? Let's start from here. The plugins. Inside of the plugins here, you see I have Elementor and Elementor Pro installed, but just keep in mind that I decided to use this page builder, but this is not the page builder that you have to use. You can make use of Elementor or Bricks Builder or Gutenberg, whatever you make use of, as long as it supports JetFormBuilder, it's going to work just fine. I have JetEngine also installed here because I want to be able to do some dynamic visibility conditions, which I'm going to show you for sure in a bit. But also I have the Fluent Snippets plugin here. My purpose of installing the Fluent Snippet plugin is just so that I can be able to add a simple snippet, which you can find in the description below. Also, I have the JetFormBuilder user login action here. It's a simple add-on that you can get when you come inside of your account, your JetFormBuilder account. You just need to scroll all the way down until you find user login action. You can download it from here and simply upload the plugin back to your WordPress site. And that's really all of what I really need here as per the plugins. So let's move on very quickly. What we need to do now is to create our first form. And the first form here is just a simple form that will help us to check whether the email address entered into the form actually does exist on the website. So let's do that. Let's add a new form by clicking on Add New Form. Of course, you can get to the form by coming inside of JetFormBuilder and clicking on Forms. Once we're inside of here, we can give this form any name of our choice. In my case, I'm going to call this Check Email Address. Something like that should be fine. Now, we want to start from scratch. Let's just toggle off Save Form Records because we don't want this saving the form records, at least for now, in our own use case. And we just want to click on Start from Scratch. Now, let's take off this hidden field. We don't need this. Let's also take off this field, or maybe just edit the field so it kind of says what we need it to say. For example, here we want to add check email, or maybe just email as the title of this field here. Now, once you add that inside of the key here, you want to type in email or anything that makes sense in your own case. This is fine. On the right here, on the block, I want to come down here and specify that the field type is an email field type. And that should be fine. And that will just help with the browser validation. That's the entire reason for doing that. Is just so when a person enters something that is not an email, the browser validates and says, hey, that's not an email. You have to put the right thing there. Okay, we want to come down here to where we have validation, and this is where things get very important. I want to come down here to advanced, and here I'm going to validate. This is going to be a server validation. I want to validate that this email is actually on the list of user emails on the site. To do that, I'm just going to click on add new here. Inside of rule type, I'm going to select here server-side callback. So what that means is that this is going to call a custom function, and that function is going to look in the database and check if the email address entered into this particular field actually does exist. So what are we going to add as the function name here? Pretty simple. I'm going to add this snippet in the description below. You just have to copy it. It's a very simple, small snippet here. And what it does is pretty simple. All it does is just creates this function. This function is email verification of users. I'm just going to copy that right here. I'm going to right click, click on copy. I'm going to come back inside of the form. I'm going to paste that function name here. Now, just to explain what it does, it's a very simple function that's created and checks in the database if an email exists. And if it does exist, it returns true. If it doesn't exist, it returns false. Simple as that. Very simple. I'm going to include this again in the description. You can copy it. Now let's come back inside of the forms here. Once you have the function name inside of there, you want to type in the error message. Keep in mind the error message that you put inside of here is the error message that will show if the email address does not match any known record in the database. You know, something like that. Or you can just make sure it's something like that did not work and that should be okay. Okay. Something that will tip the person off if he isn't putting the right email address, but will also not confirm to someone that the email address doesn't exist in the database. This is not very important to the tutorial on hand, but it's maybe classified as a simple security tutorial, right? Okay, that said, let's continue by coming down here to update, and we've updated that function. So what this form is going to do now is just when we enter an email address, it checks to ensure that that email address exists in the database. Let's do a little bit of tidy up before we continue here. By coming down here to validation, I want to toggle off enable form safety. My reason for toggling that off is that I don't want to bother with the cache issue right now on the site. And as you can see inside of here, it says that you should toggle this option off if the form's page caching can't be disabled. It can be disabled, but I don't want to bother with that right now. So I just want to toggle that off. You can leave it toggled on if you know what you're doing here. Now, the next thing we want to do is to come inside of where we have the post submit action and create a new post submit action. What do we want to happen when a person types in the correct email address and clicks on next? I mean, we need to change that submit button anyway to next. Why don't we do it now? Let's just come here and change this to next. Okay. And so let's come back inside of post submit action. What do we need to happen next? Well, it's pretty simple. Just as I showed at the beginning of this video, I need the email address to be entered. And once I click on next, what I need to happen is that it should send that email address into the URL so that I can then use that URL, whatever is found inside of that URL parameter, to inform the next form of the login action. If this is getting complicated, don't worry, I'm going to show you just how to get this done. Let's come now inside of where we have redirect to page as the action. And we're going to say redirect to the same page, which is current page. And we're going to use URL query arguments. This is where it gets important. Once we add a new field, we're going to select the field. The field is going to show all of the available fields here. If we select email, it means that inside of the URL, we're going to have email and then the email address of the person which we pass to the URL. So we can do that. We can select email and we can come down here and click on update. That's simply what we need to do. We can publish that. And after publishing, we can come inside of the editor here and then select that form that we just created. I'm going to refresh this and add inside of here the form that I just created and then test this out, see how things really work out for us. Now inside of here, I'm just going to add the form, JetForm, the widget here. going to drag that widget inside of here, and I'm going to select that form which I just created, which is check email address. And that's simply the purpose of this form. Just check email address and go next, right? Okay, so let's click on publish. Let's come to the front end now. This time I'm not going to use the same browser window. I'm going to instead open an incognito window. And why? Because I'm already logged in here. And remember, I'm trying to create a login form. I'm already logged in, so let's just pretend to be a visitor to the site by using an incognito window. So inside of the incognito window now, I'm just going to type in my website address here and click on enter. Now inside of here, I can see I have the form, the email, which I can enter, and then I can go next. Now what email is that going to be? Depending on whether that email exists in the database, this is either going to work or is going to throw an error. Let's try to use an email that does not exist in the database just to try it out. Now let's say hey@Toby. Of course, you can see the browser validation kicking in right now. You can see it says, please enter a valid email. And that's because this is not yet a valid email. It has not yet begun the server-side callback because it's currently doing the browser validation. Well, let's make this a valid email first. So we're going to type in .com. And now it's actually a valid email, but now the server-side callback has kicked in. And as you can see now, the error message here says that did not work because that email address simply does not exist in the database. We have a test user created here just to test whether when we enter an email address that exists on the site, whether that form will let us submit it. As you can see, my tests at tobysalami.com. Let's just copy that email address and we're going to come back here to the incognito window and we want to paste that email address inside of there. Now, when we paste that inside of there, as you can see, it doesn't throw up any error. If we remove the M and try .co, we see it throws up an error because it doesn't have any record of such email address inside of the database. Now let's return that to .com and try to go next. See what happens now. When we click on next, what happens? It reloads the page. And as you can see, what do you notice inside of the URL is that the email has been passed as a query variable, and that email address has been passed right here inside of the URL. This is very, very good because right now we can take whatever is inside of that URL and show it right here on the page. You know, something just as I showed at the beginning of this video where it shows, hey, this email address is what you're trying to log into, and then you now have the field to enter a password. Now, we cannot do it with this same form. We probably can, I'm not too sure. I haven't thought about it more than 2 seconds, but let's do it the simple way. Let's try to create a different form that is going to validate the email address that's inside of this URL here, and then be able to use the password that the person enters to log them in. Let's do that. We want to come back to the forms and we want to create a new form. The form now is going to be a simple login form. But that form is actually going to take the email address from the URL as we have said before. Let's give this form a name. The form, we can call it login to site. Something like that should be fine. Now inside of save form records here, we want to toggle that off. We want to click on start from scratch. We want to start from scratch as always. Now I want to delete that one because we don't need a hidden field here. Or do we? Do we need a hidden field? I think we do. Well, we're going to find out in a bit, but let's just go on. Now we want to add inside of this field here, password. We just want to type in password. And also inside of here, we want to type in password. It also doesn't matter what we enter here, but just something to inform the user that what we need them to enter now is the password. So we can do that. We can come inside of here and where we have the field type on the block, we want to select password. This is just for browser validation. The only reason for having this here is just so that a person can enter their password and have it show as an actual password field. That's all. That's the only reason why we're changing that to password. We can continue now. We don't have any validation for this particular one. Of course, this will only be validated when a person attempts to log in. So we're going to use a form submit action to do that. Let's just change this button here to login, and that should be okay. want to come inside of JetForm here, and inside of post submit action. Now inside of post submit action here, we want to add a new action, and then we want to select user login. This is what will show up when we install the add-on that we download from the JetFormBuilder account, and we want to come back here and select user login. Now inside of user password field, we want to select password. We want to leave the remember field, it's not necessary. But where we have whether to use secure cookie, we can leave that toggled on because that's going to just ensure additional security for this particular form. You notice here that one field is missing, which is the user login field. What is expected here is either the username or the email address. And recall that in the previous form, which is actually going to fire and take that email address to the URL, that definition, the definition of actually sending the email address to the URL is important for us here. And how? Because now if we click on, let's just click on update just to close this for now. It says this is a required field. We know coming for that. So let's just click on update anyway. And we're going to come here and add in a new hidden field. What that hidden field is going to do is simple. All it's going to do is take the email address that now actually does exist in the URL, okay? Now we're going to select email. We're just going to call this email address as the name here. What we call it here really doesn't matter. All it needs to do is to select inside a field value here. We want it to do a URL query variable with the query variable key of email. Why? Because that is the same query variable key that we have inside of here. Do you recall? That's the exact same one that we have here. So we're going to use that exact query variable key right here. And that makes complete sense, doesn't it? Now, if we come back inside of the JetForm settings here and edit the user login action, we can then select email address as the user login field, and that will work just fine. Again, as we did in the previous one, we want to come down here and toggle off enable form safety because we don't need that for now because of the fact that I have cache enabled on the site and all that. But once I am done with this, I just want to click on publish. Now, what this will simply do is to take what we have inside of the URL and initiate a login based on the password we pass inside of here. All right, now that we know that, we can come back inside of our editor and want to add in a new form. Let's just duplicate this one, and we're going to select inside of here the form we just created. But we don't have it as an option here because we've not refreshed the page, so let's just do that. Let's refresh now and see the latest form, and then select that form as the second form here. Now, a question may be on your mind. Well, will two forms be showing on the website? Of course not. I showed you at the beginning of this video that just one form is going to be showing at a time. You're going to have the email form, which is going to validate the email, send it to the URL, and then the second form is going to show up for the password. So let's select the second form here. Let's select that as login to site. That's the form we created. Now we're going to use our dynamic visibility, which is enabled because of the fact that we have Jet Engine installed on our website. So for this first form, we're going to come here and select, of course, we're going to say inside of dynamic visibility, we're going to toggle this on. And what we're going to say here is that if it exists, we're going to select exists here. If what exists, if the field, which is, and we're going to select macro as the option here. Let's just scroll down until we find the Jet Engine macro option. That's it. And then inside of macros, we're going to select here query variable. Where is it? Let's come down. There it is. Okay. Now we're going to select query variable right there. And of course, what's going to be the query variable name? You know what it is, right? You know the query variable name is email. So what we're saying here essentially is that if email exists in the URL as a query variable, then we want this to be hidden. So we're going to change this to hide. All right. So the email field, the email form is going to get hidden once that has been passed to the URL, because the entire purpose of having that form is done. Now the password form is going to kick in which case we're also going to put a dynamic visibility condition on it to say, hey, if that now exists in the URL, if any email exists inside of the URL, then we need you to show up for the password. So let's just do the same here. Of course, we could have duplicated this with the dynamic visibility, which is what we should do now. So let's just delete this and instead duplicate this form, right? So if we duplicate this, it's easier for us to just simply choose the form here, the second form, right? And also come inside of the advanced settings here, and inside of dynamic visibility, we want to say that this should show. So based on the exact same conditions, based on the condition that it's in the URL, we need the password form to show up, right? And that makes complete sense. Now we can click on publish, and let's test this out and see how things show up here. We can come back here inside of the incognito browser, and we want to refresh this. Let's see how things look now after we refresh. We see that it's no longer showing the form that has the email address field. It's now showing the second form, which only has the password field here. And this makes total complete sense, doesn't it? You can see that that's what is in the URL here, and based on that, you have your dynamic visibility condition. Okay, now you can simply enter your password here. Let me try the password here and click on login. As you can see, I entered the wrong password, and it says the password you enter for the email address mytest@tobisalami.com is incorrect. Lost your password? You see, now it makes complete sense because this one is trying to validate that password, and because I entered the wrong password, it tells me the password is incorrect. But let me try to enter the right password now and see what I have. Let's try it out. Let's click on enter, see if that works now. See if that actually does log in, and that works. You can see inside of here, you have forms successfully submitted. You can of course change that message as you already know, but more importantly is the fact that this has now finally logged in. You can see my name right up at the very top there, and you can go to the WP admin dashboard if you so desire. So one part of this is still left, and the part that's left is this. We need to be able to show the email address that is inside of this URL. We need to show it on the page here and say, hey, you're attempting to log into this particular email. So we can do that. We can come back here and very simply, we can add that. Let's come back inside of the form here, the form that actually has the password field, this form, and we can very simply add that inside of here. Now inside of this form here, I can simply add a shortcode widget, a very simple shortcode widget here, which I'm going to use to actually fetch what is in the URL and then write something like login into, and then I'm going to fetch that email address from the URL, just like you saw at the beginning of this video. So login into, and then I'm going to add the email address here. But what email address? We're going to come back inside of our dashboard here, come to JetEngine. That's another function of JetEngine inside of this tutorial here. We're going to come here to shortcode generator, and we want to select that we need to be able to fetch JetEngine data from where? And we want to fetch from the query variable. And what query variable? The exact same query variable name, which is email. Once we have that typed in, you don't have to do anything else. All you need to do is copy the shortcode. We can come back now inside our form here and just paste that shortcode inside of there. Now, if we click on save and we come back inside of the incognito browser here and we refresh this, we see login into, and then you have the email address that the person is attempting to log into right here. Just like that, pretty simple, you can get this to actually work. But you may be wondering, somebody may get smart and may say to himself, well, why don't I just enter this email address directly? Just type in the URL here. In fact, you know what? We're going to demonstrate that right now. Let's open a new incognito window, okay? And let's just try again to come here to demo@tobisalami.com. Let's start from the beginning. You know, instead of actually going through the form, why don't I just come here, paste that inside of the URL right there and click on enter. And you know, this would just load the page up for me. I don't have to check any validation here. In fact, I can come inside of the URL here and change this to something else, such as my, and then click on enter, and you can see it reflects inside of here. And I'm just going to add a password here and try to log into this person's account because, of course, I know that that's how it's working here. You can get very, very smart by doing that, not so. But there's a way around that too. And we're going to introduce one more plugin here, a plugin that I did not mention at the beginning of this video. It's a redirection plugin. You can just search for redirection. It's a free plugin you can find in the WordPress repository, and you can just click on install right here. Install the plugin. I install this on all of the websites that I actually do manage because I sometimes have to do redirections once in a while. Once you install it, activate it too, and then you could go to the redirection setup. Once you're inside of the redirection setup here, you're going to be asked whether you want to configure this. You're going to say yes, you want to start the setup. It's going to ask if you needed to monitor, when a URL changes so that you can do a redirection. I like to say yes. It's going to ask if I need to log all of the redirects. I like to say yes to that too. It's going to ask me if I want to store IP information for people who are actually redirected. This will depend entirely on you and the laws of your land, but I like to leave that untoggled and click on continue. Now it's going to tell me it's going to do the REST API setup, and I'm going to say finish setup. It's going to set up the redirection, and in no time it's going to be ready. Once I click on continue now and click on ready to begin, now I can begin to add my redirection rules. What redirection rule do I need to add here? It's very, very simple. Now that we're here, what we want to do is to ensure that the source URL, which is going to include the query parameter, is targeted such that if a person tries to access that source URL directly, then it redirects the person back to where he should have been coming from. Let's do that. Let's come back here and just copy what we have in the URL. Assuming that this is the correct one, a person has actually gone through it and he has landed on this particular page here. We know that this is the kind of page a person is supposed to land if the person legitimately passed through that form. So let's just paste that URL right there. We don't want to specify every single possible email address. So what we want to do is to use what we call a regular expression. The same kind of regex that we use when we're working with Query Builder. I have videos covering that and, multiple videos on my channel. You can check that out. But let's just proceed now to select inside of here regex. What we're doing is actually selecting a regular expression, something to define that a range of possible values or email addresses can be targeted. So instead of using one email address here, we're just going to type in here a dot and a star. And what that simply means, a dot would mean any character. That's what the dot means in regular expression. And a star would mean any number of any characters. So it means simply that anything you add after the equal to sign here should be targeted. So whatever email address you add inside of this URL, as long as I know this is my login URL page, then it should, of course, target all of those email addresses and then redirect to the main login page. Let's proceed now. We know that this question mark means something inside of regular expression, but as you can see right here, it says that if you want to match this directly, which we want to do, we want to match that because it's a query variable. We want to escape it. To escape it, we're just going to use a backward slash right here, and that will make the question mark or that query variable an actual query variable instead of acting as a regular expression, right? Okay. Now that that's done, we can of course take off all of the beginning part of this URL because we know that this is our home page. But I assume that if you're working with, your login page or something, then you would have a page like this. I'm working on this on my home page, so I can take off all of the beginning parts of that URL because that's my home page, and my home page is represented by a forward slash. That's it. Once you use a forward slash, you are referring to your home page. Now that we've formulated what should be targeted, what we need to do next is to add probably a title to describe what we're doing here. We're just going to add this. I like to add this so that every single time I come back here, I can remember what I created as my redirection. So I'm going to write here, redirect all attempts to get to the password page, the password step, without going through the login, without going through the email phase. Something like that should be fine. Anything that's pretty descriptive should be fine. Now inside of match right here, I'm going to select, instead of URL only, I'm going to select URL and referrer. Now, this would simply do something really nice for me. And what it's going to do is that it's going to check whether the person was coming from the URL that he should actually have been coming from, or if he is attempting to actually go to that URL directly, okay? And so that's what I want to do. I want to select a referrer here. And what's going to be my referrer? It's pretty simple. Again, I'm going to type in demo.tobisalami.com. If you're on a login page or you're creating this for a login page, I also expect that you would put in the URL to that login page. But for me, I'm doing this on my homepage, so I'm going to do this just like this, okay? So what I'm saying is that unless the person is coming from here, send him right back here, okay? Now, I've not specified that yet. I'm going to select under, you see where it says matched target. What it's saying is that if the person is actually coming from here, then what should happen? I'm going to leave it empty. It says leave empty to ignore. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to leave matched target empty. And my reason is this. If the person is coming from the right place, then just go ahead. You can go ahead to the next step. But if you're not coming from the right place, which is unmatched target, then I need you returning back here. Of course, if again, you have your login page, you want to type in that login URL right there, okay? That's entirely your choice. Now that this is done, all I need to do now is click on Add Redirect. Now what it's going to do is create that redirection for us. If we come back here to this incognito page and we want to test this again, if we try to refresh this, we see what happens. I want to refresh. Let's refresh this so we can have the page load fine. All right. Let me try now to type in a valid email address such as mytests@tobisalami.com. And then I'm going to click on next. Now, when I click on next, it's just going to refresh this page and you see it pass the URL and you see it, you're logging into this, which is very nice. This is what we need, right? But let's assume a person wants to be smart and just comes to the URL here and makes changes. Let's say he wants to change this to whatever he wants to change this to right there inside of the URL and then click on enter. What's going to happen? He's going to be redirected right back to the page where he should have been coming from. Because of course he did not pass through the initial phase, so he doesn't deserve to try a password. And just like that, you've also secured this so that nobody can go to the next step without actually passing through this first form. And just like that, we're done with this. I hope I've been able to explain to you very clearly how to first validate an email address before you go ahead to enter the password, validate that too, and enable the person to log in, including, of course, securing the second step of the two-step login. That's it, my people. Until next time, you know how it is, right? Stay dynamic.